All right. Good morning, everyone. This is the Sugar Trades Trading Group channel. And happy Friday to everyone. What an interesting week it has been. We have broken the old all-time high. We are now in price discovery, and we're off and running here with XRP. We are doing something for the first time in 8 years, and that is that we are breaking the old all-time high on XRP on the macro level. The only other time that we have to compare is back here in 2017, early 2017 in March. So just a fair warning, this video might be a little longer. I'm going to try to keep it as concise as possible, but I do want to go through just several things that I'm looking at as we go into the weekend and as we go over the next couple of weeks. So I'm currently on the weekly chart here on XRP, and this is on the Bitstamp exchange just because it gives us the most chart history view. And what I want to do is start and go back here in 2017 and talk about several things. First of all, I think I spoke about yesterday, or maybe not, but there is an area when a true macro market expansion occurs. There's an area that some people will call the creek. Well, that didn't save. Okay, it saved. So this is what some will call the creek. And if you notice on a macro level, what happens is when that old all-time high is broken, there's this exponential expanse in the market that occurs. And there's about an 80% region that gets created that never gets revisited again in a future bear market. If you notice back in March of 2020, we had a very much a black swan event. The world was closing down. Oil futures went negative, like negative dollars, and XRP collapsed along with Bitcoin during that week to about 11.5 cents. But what I want you to notice is there was clearly a gap, a value gap here that never got revisited again. So what I did is I wanted to go back and dig into this 2017 breakout because clearly it's the only other time we have in all of XRP that we can look at what were some of the market reactions, what was the tendency for price to do when price had been accumulating for over 2.5 years in this wedge, and then it broke out. What was the nature of that breakout? So hopefully you're following my train of thought as to why I'm looking at this. And so what I want you to notice is just a couple of general observations first. First, if you notice, when we broke out above this old all-time high at around 6.2 cents, again, we had this 80% gap that never got revisited in a future bear market, okay, way over here in March of 2020. This is March of 2017. So 3 years later, bears tried to drive price down, but there was this gap here that was created, and we call this the creek. And so price crossed this creek. So that's about an 80% move. And then notice that in this weekly candle, plus the next 2 weeks, we moved about 500%, roughly, give or take, 525%. So the question then becomes is, would we see that same kind of breakout? What would a 525% breakout above the old all-time high look like for us right now? Not even counting that this could still be just a wave 3, and then we're going to put in a higher wave 5. So let's just look at what that potential count could be. Now, I know there's a lot of counts out there that count this as a wave 1 right here, and maybe that is possible. We, of course, don't want to rule anything out. This could be a wave 1, but I've shared with you over recent videos why I'm not convinced that this was a wave 1, that this was final accumulation, and this was actually a wave 1. It's okay. I know that this isn't typical of a wave 2 in Elliott Wave. Typically, you do not get complex corrective waves for wave 2s in Elliott Wave theory, but just bear with me for a moment. So if this is the count, and this was wave 4, then I believe we have a final blow off wave 5 up to $13 to $15. Okay, so that's assuming that count is correct. But what I want you to notice is that typically wave 3s. So if we come back here to 2017 and we do the count, I don't think you can argue that this was a 1, that's a 2, this is 3. Here's your complex correction for 4. right? And then you had the fifth, okay? And typically when a market macro expands, it's doing it on the third wave, okay? So I want you to notice that. So let's assume this is just wave 3 for the moment. It really doesn't matter either way, because the question still remains, when we're breaking out of a 7 to 8 year channel, as some of our friends on Twitter would call it, what's the likely move for price expansion when we're talking on a macro level? So if the old all-time high was around 340, let's just say 341, I can't get any more detailed than that, and we were to do a similar breakout move of 526%, that would put price for this wave up to around $20, $22, okay? Let's just assume that it's only half of that power. Maybe you're like, well, Sugar, there were conditions back then. We didn't have leverage to kind of suppress the price. Back then we didn't have as much liquidity in the system, so this was more of a lower level liquidity event. That's true. But also back then we didn't have law clarity that's getting introduced. We didn't have ETFs that were getting introduced. We didn't have nearly the amount of global exchanges, on-ramps for people to buy XRP. Back here, you had to buy Bitcoin first, then get into XRP on just a few different exchanges. But let's assume maybe it's just half of this. Maybe we just go up 250%. So maybe we just make half of that move. Well, that's $12, okay? And again, if that's only wave 3, and then we have wave 4, which I've shared with you in recent videos, that if this is wave 1, this is wave 3, then we have a more simple wave 4, because typically in Elliott Wave counts, in a 5-wave move, the 2 could be simple and the 4 complex, like back in here. See, this was a simple correction and then a more complex correction. So you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Maybe here the move is, this was wave 1, this was a complex 2, wave 3, simpler 4, and then a 5th to put in. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to share with you is how am I looking at the market? How are other people looking at the market? We are doing something for the first time in 8 years. So my question is what's the most conservative approach to look at? And I think that one can make the conservative argument that we're going to do at least half of this kind of market expansion from 2017, 2018. And the reason for that is this contraction here was a 2x of this contraction. So I'm just going conservative. What if this expansion is only half of that expansion? Now, some would argue the other way. They would say we're going to do double of this expansion because of double the contraction. The larger the base, the higher in space, so they say. So maybe we do 1,000%. Maybe we do 1,000 some odd percent on this move, and we go all the way to, what would that take us to? $38. Okay, is that possible? That's possible. And then we put in a 4th, and then we put in a final, a final 5th. All I'm saying is you have to keep your mind open to the possibilities and the probabilities. And what I'm really trying to look at is probabilities. I'm not telling you that it's possible that XRP could go to $1,000 overnight. Is that possible? Well, it's just as possible as XRP could go to 0 tomorrow, really. So I'm not really talking about possibilities. I'm trying to look at what's most probable based on the only other macro breakout market expansion pattern that we have for XRP. And so I hope this gives you a little bit of an insight as to where we are looking. We're looking anywhere between, right here at $10 all the way up to $14, $15 conservatively. And that's possibly just wave 3. Now, if this wave count is correct, and this is wave 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is 5, then yeah, $13 to $15 is probably the likely top of our market, although we could get overthrow to 20 to the low 20s. It just depends on FOMO, speculation. So that Elliott Wave count is out there. Again, I'm not convinced that that's the right count because of things like Stellar. Clearly, this wasn't a wave 1 for Stellar. Excuse me. And I think Stellar shows us a little bit better that this was a wave 2 for most assets. Most assets, if you go and look at them, like Stronghold, Velo, H-Bar, they just had a wave 2. And it was a much clearer wave 2. People might say, well, why didn't XRP look that way? Well, XRP has been showing a lot more underlying strength, even in bearish conditions over the last year or so, right, in the market. So that's something we have to keep in mind. And also keep in mind that XRP, along with Stellar and a few others, completely missed the entire bull market of 2021 and 2022. So that's also another factor you have to take into consideration is we missed that bull market. I might have said bear market. We missed this bull market. So we stayed internal to the old all-time high. So the question again is what's most likely? What's most reasonable as you look at time and price and you look at the only other macro condition that we had where we had true market expansion above an old all-time high. Granted, and keep in mind, this old all-time high was contracted and reaccumulated for 7 to 8 years, plus a new 7-month accumulation right here to now go in and make new highs. I ask you, what's most reasonable? Is it most reasonable in a macro breakout condition like this with true market expansion that we're only going to go hit $5 and that this was a fake out? Or is it more likely that we at least go to $11 to $14, $10 to $15, whatever? It's a range right now because we just don't know. We have to wait for price action to start getting to those areas. Then we can start getting an idea as we look at weekly RSI, as we look at, for that matter, as we look at monthly RSI as well. So as we look at the weekly RSI, as we compare that to Bitcoin and what Bitcoin is doing, I believe it's at least going to 175 in this cycle. As we look at Bitcoin dominance, which continues to collapse, we might see a little bit of support here coming in on the weekly MAs at some point, but I believe Bitcoin dominance eventually goes down to 50% before the end of this altcoin bull run. And as we compare other, tokens and as we look at the overall market. So these are the things that you're taking into account almost on a daily basis. But here's what I am really watching for over the next 1 to 3 weeks. I believe this weekly candle is going to tell us a lot by the end of the week when we close on Sunday evening. And I'll share with you why that is. I want to see how far we get in this final part of the week when clearly we have higher volume than the previous week now. We've broken above the old all-time high. I want to see how far this candle gets in expansion before the end of the week. And then I'm looking at the next 2 weeks to also be bullish to see where we're going. And again, I base that on looking back here where we had this was your breakout candle and this was your expansion candle across the creek, which that would take us to today's prices at around $7.20. Then we might see a slight pullback to the low 6. Then our final move up to $10 to $13. The question at that point is going to be, was this a wave 5 or was this a wave 3 with now a wave 4 to come, then to put in a final 5th? I hope that makes sense of where I'm thinking and just where I'm keeping my options open as I look at the market. But of course, we are now at a point we've not been at in 8 years. So this is why we're watching closely. We want to see what these candles are going to tell us, specifically on the weekly and on the daily. Honestly, anything below those 2 time frames is just going to be noise. Kind of alluding to a current event here overnight. We did have a little bit of a pullback, which I love to see. That was a retest of the old all-time high, which is very cute. The bots wanted to do that just to make sure. So let's see how we continue to hold support here. Could we have a liquidity grab here on the hourly, on the 50 EMA? We certainly could do that before we continue back higher. But I believe we're clearly in the expansion phase. We're in a full-blown parabola. And here's the good news. This is only a subwave 1, 2. This was 3. This is probably most likely 4. And now we're putting in a 5th, which should be pretty strong because this is 3 of 3 of 3. And if you don't know what that means, that's just Elliott Wave talking about the concatenation of these waves and how they get packed within each other. And that's why these kinds of moves really catch people off guard. Now, of course, it's funny. I'm already seeing the FUD on Twitter. They shall remain nameless, but I'm already seeing people who are saying, all right, now XRP is going to sub $1. That's possible. I would just encourage those people who are talking that kind of smack on Twitter to go ahead and take out a short position, show us your short position and your conviction level, and then we'll believe you. So anyway, hope this was helpful. I hope it helps you to see what I'm looking at over the next 1 to 3 weeks. Again, I stand by my conviction that we have to be done with this move by the end of July, the latest middle of August, towards the end of August. But, and yeah, so we could have a little bit more time here. And part of the reasoning for that is because back here you did not have leverage and you did not have near the amount of liquidity in the system. So this could take a little bit longer to get there. But I think we're in a true market expansion at this point, and we'll just be watching for where some of these intermediate targets get hit. Once we know where this intermediate wave 3 is, that's going to give us our most likely targets for up here. So I'll keep you posted. There's some other great Elliott Wave statisticians that are posting on Twitter as well. So yeah, everybody, hope you enjoy your weekend. It might be a very sleepless weekend, but hope everyone has a great weekend. I will probably hop on here for another video or two during the weekend and keep in touch with you. But also wanted to mention one other thing. We do have free access to the XRP Whale Bot. Currently, you can get free access to that, but I will be closing that down and going back to a pay model for that. But even the pay model is only going to be 5 XRP. Of course, 5 XRP is getting somewhat expensive. So if you want to get in for free access, go ahead and jump on now, and would love to have you on board. And we'll be able to see when Chris and Arthur are moving their XRP from their wallets to exchanges so that we can get an inside view as to when price might be finding at least either local resistance or the top of the market cycle. All right, everybody, have a great one. See ya.